Welcome to the Business for Aligned Women podcast. I'm Honey. I'm a coach working primarily with women and specializing in aligned business, personal transformation, and embodiment. Each week here I'll be sharing business strategy, business advice, tips and tools for you to think more deeply, for you to get more self-aligned, and for you to start your week in the most conscious and intentional way possible. Welcome to this week's episode. Something a little bit different this week, another longer episode speaking with one of my clients and diving into her services and her expertise. Today we're speaking to Bianca Winter-Mallari. She is a somatic therapist who specializes in complex and childhood trauma, and she is a wealth of knowledge on this topic. And I know that you can see people on social media and make assumptions about when they started. And I just want to make it really obvious and really clear that Bianca's actually been working in this professional capacity, I think for over 8 years, something like that. This woman has years and years of professional experience and actually helping people in the real world under her belt. She's very well established and credible in this topic. Working with Bianca has been an absolute treat. She's also Capricorn Sun, and I think that is just so obvious in the ways that both of us approach work and business. Definitely a client that I manifested, and one of those clients that I saw what she was doing and I was just thinking like, oh God, you're really good. Like, you've got this really good eye, but the marketing is just not doing what marketing needs to do. I have a lot of people that talk to me about wanting coaching, and I kind of look at their socials every now and then. I think, God, just let me help you. And this was definitely Bianca. And I feel like mine and Bianca's intensive was probably one of the most massively transformative intensives that I've done. So I will suggest that you make changes in your business. And for some people, I suggest that we entirely overhaul your business. And we did that with Bianca. She came out the end of a 10-week intensive with a totally new business, an almost totally new brand, totally new target market, and totally new offerings, and calling herself something totally new. So we totally overhauled her business in order for it to be more successful, reach more people, and make more money. It's helped validate her, and it's very validating for me to see, because she had so much potential, but just the way she was approaching things was not letting her fully express her potential. It was kind of keeping her a bit trapped and a bit locked in earning less money and not being as successful as she knows in her gut she will be and should be. And Bianca is someone who did almost everything that I asked her to do. It is rare to find a client who has zero pushback and is as open to feedback as Bianca is. And when you have that mix of being open to feedback, actioning things, showing up consistently, bam, that's when the change happens. That's the transformation. That's the expansion. So she is also a really good case study of, if you go into coaching open-minded, trusting your coach, knowing that they have the best outcome for you in mind, and you do the things that they ask you to do rather than just talking about it or going away and thinking about it or rehashing it or getting defensive or wanting to push back, you will achieve so much, so much. And it's such a big difference. It's just like measurable. It's quantifiable, the difference that happens. So all of that to say that this interview and Bianca's experience in coaching is a really, really good case study with what's possible. And aside from the business part of it, she is an incredibly organized, grounded, what's the word I'm thinking of? Pragmatic is the word I'm thinking of. Pragmatic woman. And I have paid for counselors and psychologists in the past who are just knew were just all over the place and so disorganized, and it meant that they didn't help me in a way that I needed to be helped. But I know that Bianca is someone who you will be in safe hands with. She will be really organized and really together and really present and really embodied so that she can hold that space and that transformation for you. If you are looking for a therapist, I can absolutely vouch for Bianca. All of that said, jump into this interview, open ears, enjoy it. I hope you learn something. I hope that you get some piece of advice. Okay, Bianca, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Bianca. I'm the founder of Embodied Self-Therapy. I'm a trauma-informed counsellor and somatic therapist based in Sydney.
Beautiful. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you offer and how you got into becoming a therapist?
Sure. So I offer online individual therapy to people all around the world who have experienced complex or childhood trauma. And what got me into becoming a therapist, I landed in this work mostly inspired by my own healing journey. Also being a survivor of childhood trauma, growing up in a quite dysfunctional household, I always had this innate curiosity, wanting to understand myself and those around me. And this being such a core pillar of who I am, I found myself studying psychology and working with people in community services. And that was 10 years ago now. I've worked with many different populations over the years: mental health, drug and alcohol, youth, disability. And this is my first year in private practice. So I think working for NGOs for so long, I found myself in a situation where I was limited in the way I could support people. I saw how people often got lost in systems and bureaucracy, and I often found that the values of the organizations, management, and even the programs that I had to facilitate, down to the language, didn't really align with me and was actually re-traumatizing clients. So about a year ago, I experienced pretty serious burnout, which led me to leave that organization. And after dedicating some time to looking after myself, I realized that I had the opportunity now to carve out something of my own. So here I am.
Yeah, and I think it's that long-term experience as well is quite a point of difference with you. I think that people can come across your work and a bit more recent growth and think, oh, she's just started, but you actually have many years of experience in this modality.
Yeah, that's right. New to business and private practice, but definitely a lot of experience working one-to-one with people.
Yeah, really established experience. I also I worked in 2 NGOs and they were very disappointing experiences.
Yeah, it's such a shame because, we're often in those organizations serving clients with really complex needs who really need the support, the most vulnerable clients as well. So it's really a shame.
Yeah. And then the structure of the company falls on you as an individual because you're the one who's actually communicating with those clients.
Totally. Yeah, I know it.
Yeah. So, as you mentioned, your work mostly addresses complex and childhood trauma. Can you explain a little bit more about what complex trauma actually is and how someone might have that express in their lives?
Sure. I think when people think of trauma, usually they think of PTSD and single incident trauma. So those one-off events like assault or accidents, natural disasters. But what complex trauma are those traumatic events that happen repeatedly over a long period of time. And it usually occurs within interpersonal relationships, dynamics like emotional, physical, sexual, financial abuse, emotional neglect, bullying, domestic violence. All of these are examples of complex trauma. And complex trauma can actually be more detrimental to a person's well-being because it is ongoing, because it does happen over that prolonged period of time. It erodes away at our trust in others and the world, even our sense of self and our reality. And it can be even more detrimental when it happens in childhood, at a time where we're still developing, we're learning about the world, we're forming our sense of self, we're forming these vital attachments to others. If this is disrupted by trauma, it can have really devastating impacts on the trajectory of one's life. It impacts all aspects of their life, their physical, mental health, their quality of relationships, how they show up in work, their ability to learn, even relax. So that's what complex trauma is. How does it present? That's a simple question with a really complex answer, but I think that's why it's called complex trauma or complex PTSD, because it's so complex in how it is caused, how it's experienced, how it presents. There's such a high prevalence of it as well. I think Blue Knot said that 1 in 4 adult Australians present with a lived experience of complex trauma. Mm-hmm. And it's crazy. And in its extreme, it can present as self-harm, personality disorders, dissociative disorders, but even more commonly as depression, anxiety, and even those more socially acceptable characteristics like perfectionism, overachieving, people-pleasing. So really, there's no one way that complex trauma can present. It's really getting curious about who the person is and their context, looking beyond their symptoms to not just what's going on, but why.
Yeah, and I know as an autistic person, an autistic business coach as well, that there is a school of thought that even believes that autism and ADHD is caused by childhood trauma.
Yeah.
I don't fully ascribe to it, but it's an interesting thing to think about. And I actually don't think many people know that it's not necessarily something that you're born with.
There are definitely some crossovers with complex PTSD, ADHD, and autism, for sure.
So you've mentioned that you work specifically trauma-informed, and I'd love for you to talk about what that is and why it's important. I know it's a bit of a hot buzzword, and just from my very minimal awareness of what trauma-informed is, that there's a lot of people out there who are saying they're trauma-informed, but that is not what they're practicing. So I'd love to hear your approach to it.
Absolutely. Yeah. A trauma-informed approach is fundamentally about creating a safe space. It's considering everything I just spoke about, how trauma is so prevalent and how it's so diverse in its presentation. Trauma-informed care is really aware of this and is sensitive to it. You can't assume someone's trauma history, and people have different triggers and things that set them off. So it's about being neutral and keeping in mind 5 pillars of trauma-informed care. They are safety, trustworthiness, choice, collaboration, and empowerment. For someone like me, working directly with people with complex trauma histories, a trauma-informed approach is important because it recognizes how trauma impacts the individual, and then that therefore impacts the approach and the interventions used within the therapeutic context. And the effects of trauma are so diverse that the service delivery needs to be diverse as well. But this isn't just about being in session with the client. It extends to all touch points of a business or a service. So that includes how information is presented, down to the imagery used, language used, and what your business values are even. A trauma-informed approach means that those 5 pillars are embedded throughout all aspects of the business. And that's why it's important to practitioners, but it's important in a wider context because, again, what I was saying, it's so diverse and it varies person to person. It can be a little bit problematic when people are saying that they are trauma-informed, but it really comes down to how that is filtered through all touch points of their business. And yeah, honey, I know that you work a lot with women who are in service-based businesses, who are space holders and wellness. This is just a loving reminder to anyone who is working one-to-one with people in group containers, even working with the body, especially if you are holding space for people, to just keep those 5 pillars front of mind so that you can foster safety to the best of your ability and provide services that are safe and sensitive, because again, there is also that risk of re-traumatization as well.
I think that's a really good reminder. I feel like pretty much with everything, most business owners are just too close to their business, and they might have that in mind, and they might be really consistent and committed to it, but they're just so close that they're blindsided to some of the things that they're doing that are not in alignment with those pillars. And I know one that's come up really consistently with my clients is just reminding them of how they present themselves, things like what they wear, or even like how messy the space is if they're filming content, or how fast they're moving, or how fast they're talking, or if they use any really jolting transitions or anything like that.
Yeah.
Like you said, it really does have to kind of trickle down to everything. And yeah, myself having a lot of hot takes in my content, that probably is not trauma informed, which is why I don't claim to be.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Because agency and being able to exercise agency is something that a lot of trauma survivors didn't have. They didn't have choice when they were on the receiving end of abuse. So being able to have choice, to exercise agency and to make decisions is really empowering for people and really important for recovery.
It's very interesting. It's made me think of when I work with people, one of the things that has always dumbfounded me is how limited people see their possibilities. Possibilities, the agency, the choices that they have on the table, their perspectives are so crazy narrow and atrophied. And I'm like, no, you could do this, you could do this, you could also do this, you could do it in this way. And it just blows their mind. It makes me wonder if it's a little bit of that, like a little bit of having less choice has made their concept of what's possible really reduced.
Yeah, it could come down to the fact that they're just conditioned to not having a choice, and they're not used to being able to exercise that.
I know that you've mentioned in your content, and you mentioned in working with me, this concept of parts theory. And I've always thought it was an interesting theory, and I'd love for you to explain it to us and explain how it could be helpful for people.
For sure, yeah. I work with parts as an intervention or a process when working with clients in session, and there are two overlapping modalities that I draw upon and use in session, being schema therapy and IFS. And each of these have their own ways of looking at and categorizing parts. But essentially what parts work is it recognizes that we have different parts within ourselves, within our internal world, that make up a system. And some parts may be more dominant than others, and they each have different roles. And parts can present as behavior, they can present as somatic sensations, beliefs, self-talk. So to bring it back to trauma, when we experience trauma, parts usually organize themselves around our wound or our trauma and take on protective roles so that it doesn't happen again. The aim of IFS and schema therapy is to be self-led, or to develop a healthy inner adult within us that can lead and advocate for the whole harmonized system. So making decisions and living life that is beneficial for the whole system instead of just being led by our protections or being reactive. And for some people, at first, thinking about parts or doing parts work can be a bit strange if they've never heard of it before, but you may even find that sometimes you use this language with yourself, like a part of me likes this or a part of me doesn't like that. And another example of this could be like when you're relating to a parent, right? You might love them, but a part of you is really angry at them for ways that they did or didn't show up. Some other really common parts that people might be familiar with are the inner child and the inner critic. And what parts work can actually look like in session is creating a dialogue with them, exploring how we relate to them. The client can actually externalize parts by using different objects, chairs, movements. So you can get really creative with that. But parts work can be really extremely healing. When we get to a point where our protectors can step back and allow access to wounded parts, that's where the real healing can be done. It's also really helpful in expanding our self-awareness. But I think where it can also have the most impact is in developing our self-compassion. When we are experiencing these heavier emotions like shame, guilt, anger, or even having behaviors that might be self-destructive or self-sabotaging, when you realize that this is just one part of you and that's trying to protect you, you can create space between you and that part. And that space allows room for self-compassion. It allows room for multiplicity, for multiple things to coexist. And I think that parts work can really help us develop this skill of being able to hold ourselves and hold the messiness of the human experience. That says a lot about emotional maturity, because it's never black and white. It's never all or nothing. Yeah.
Yeah, really interesting, because you've just said to me a few times, like, it's considering the whole part, but you hadn't gone into that level of detail with me before. And I feel like I really resonate with it, and I especially resonate with that, having the adult, let's say, in the room who, even if you think of a parent, like, sometimes you let the kids be naughty. Just don't let the kids be naughty constantly. And I know that the vast majority of my clients don't have that adult in the room, and that's holding them back significantly, because they don't have that person, I'm saying person, but that part that's like, okay, I get it, but you need to be disciplined in certain areas or at certain times. It makes me wonder if, because now especially I've got all these concept of like it girl, healthy girl, soft girl, strawberry girl, all this stuff. And I think maybe because of social media, people are really pigeonholing themselves. And then that, to me, doing that would say that you're only really honoring like one or two parts when you do that. But allowing yourself to kind of be this whole gamut and have, I'm saying, using the word adult, but a guiding force, was probably going to be a lot healthier than trying to fit into a cookie cutter of that one part.
Absolutely. Yeah. When we start to look at ourselves through this lens of parts, we can identify, okay, what's actually driving our motivations? What is driving us to behave in a certain way? And getting curious about that.
Cool. Let's switch gears a little bit. We're going to talk about business for a bit, and then we'll talk about therapy again.
Sure.
So this is going a little bit left field, but I think anyone who's seen your work, who's engaged with you, who follows you, would, I believe, appreciate your aesthetics, and you've really taken the time to even think about how your visuals impact your audience on a base like neurosystem level, to say you're going to do it this way because it's calming, or it's not agitating, or it's not triggering. And a pretty constant thing that happens with me is that I'm having really quite frustrating conversations with clients, trying to get them to understand the importance of cohesive and visually appealing branding and content. Now, some people have that skill and some people don't, but if you don't have it, it is something that you need to externally source and get someone like a graphic designer or a branding strategist to do it for you. You've obviously got that skill and you've got such a great eye. I do truly believe that it's definitely not all of your success, but it is a major part of your growing success. Do you think it's important to have aesthetically pleasing content, cohesive branding in business?
Well, firstly, thank you. I think it's my Libra rising, actually. But yeah, I think it is. It's so important. And I've actually had feedback from clients saying that the branding is something that drew them in, and it's something that they wanted to be associated with. I mean, for me, I'm such a creative person, and aesthetics, design, cohesion is a part of my value set, and it's something that comes quite naturally to me. So it's not just reflected in my business, but it's in all aspects of my life. Otherwise, I get anxiety. But yeah, so like fun fact, I actually studied interior design before psychology. So I do have some knowledge about composition and the psychology behind design and colors. And for me, I think that cohesion and consistency really builds trust with the community because it gives them a sense of who you are. And for example, when I post something on social media, immediately they know that it is me because of the fonts, the colors that I use, even sounds that I use in my content. It's that brand recognition. People also associate you with other brands that they've been primed by out in the world. I think about who my ideal client is and who they associate with. And I also want to slip into their narrative and to pattern match, right? I'm working with clients who have experienced childhood trauma. So I'm not using pictures of like happy families on my website. It's just, first of all, triggering, but it doesn't fit their narrative and it's so far away from where they're at. Also thinking about my client, but thinking about me too, and who embodied self-therapy is and what I'm about. I'm all about trauma healing, nervous system regulation, embodiment, safety. So again, this comes back to that trauma-informed lens, not using any triggering words, images, music, no big bright colors or jagged edge shapes and things like that. It is really, really important.
You hit the nail on the head. And I was actually talking to a creator on TikTok about this today because she did a post saying that she always worries about being repetitive. And I said, no, repetition equals safety. And she was like, holy crap, you've just like totally shifted everything for me. And people don't understand that in this speedy, overwhelmed, oversaturated, constantly overstimulated experience, literally just having something that you know what to expect is a big game changer for brand awareness and creating connection.
That's so true. Consistency is safety, and that falls under one of the trauma-informed pillars. So I love that.
And you speak so eloquently now about your business and what you're doing and why you've done certain things. And one big change that we made almost straight away at the start of your coaching intensive was to get you to commit to a more niche offering that was matched to your skill set, your values, and what you enjoy. And also was financially viable, actually going to make you money. And that was a pretty big jump for you from where you were. To reflect on that experience of just having a coach kind of come in and flip everything on you.
Yeah, honestly, that was huge. I think when we started working together, I was trying to be everything for everyone. I had all of these skills and this creativity, and I was also so excited to finally be stepping into business and carving out a space on my own terms. And I think I had this assumption that niching down and only focusing on one thing would hinder me, but that was just not true. It was actually the opposite. When you're spread out so thin, you get overwhelmed by how many different things you can talk about and offer. And I guess that kind of gave me freedom. But what you really helped me see, honey, was that it was just confusing to clients. People don't really know who you are or what you're about, and therefore you don't come across as an authority in the space because like you're a jack of all trades but master of none, right? So having that clarity, which was actually one of our business goals, and owning my niche was huge for me because that clarity resonates with people. And what I discovered is you can actually talk a lot about things when you niche down. When you focus on just one thing, you can really get into the nitty-gritty, the nuances, and explore that with your audience. And when I reflect on it, I think a big part of my imposter obviously had some reservations about claiming my niche because of the responsibility of it. Working with complex trauma, it is a big responsibility. But that was the very thing that boosted my confidence because it allowed me to really step into a space that I know and therefore can speak specifically to a specific person and a specific experience. And something like complex trauma, it is a relatively new diagnosis, although it's not a new experience. It is something that people are only really starting to acknowledge. So it's not an oversaturated space. So gaining clarity on who I am, who I'm for, this also really set me apart from other therapists. And looking at it from my client's perspective, being in this space, you kind of go about your life knowing that something's wrong and you're feeling heavily burdened, you're trying therapy, different things. It feels like you're searching everywhere for resolution and not having much luck. And then you think it's something wrong with you. But that clarity for me as a therapist, offering a particular service and wanting to find these people and connect with these specific people, for them, it was like, exhale. So if I was still operating in the way that I was before, I would actually be doing my clients, the people that I want to serve, a disservice, because I'm not saying, hey, I see you and this is a space for you. Also recognizing where my clients are at. They come to me really dysregulated, clouded, they're overthinking, they're going through stuff in their lives. They do not need something else on top of that to just confuse them more. So having that clarity really pierces through all of that, lands with them in the way that it needs to.
Yeah, and again, it's that safety, isn't it? If you're talking about tons of random stuff, it's not safe, because I don't know what I'm going to get when I bump into you or when I open your email. I do always say to people, because you do have to niche down, you do have to commit to a specific reason for what you're doing, who for, everything. And that better be something that you can see yourself passionately talking about for at least 10 years. Yeah. And if it's not, you haven't landed on the right thing yet. I see a lot of women in my community who have tried to niche down, but they're running out of gas really quick because it's a trend or it's something that they're interested in the now, but it's not a long-term passion, something that they can actually dedicate themselves to.
Yeah, definitely. That passion definitely feeds or sustains the work that you do. You know, for me, my life is all consumed by healing and trauma. And yeah, I mean, I couldn't imagine not working in this way. So I'm really grateful for you in helping me claim that.
No worries. I'm just grateful that you were open to it, because sometimes we can be a bit closed to those if they feel like really out of left field suggestions, or you probably started with me expecting that we were going to talk about a particular subject and I basically said, you shouldn't do that anymore. You could just get rid of that entirely. And I can see how that could be a bit discombobulating. But again, it's having someone who's external, who's quite far away from your business, who can see it in the context of the market and the environment, and Long can give you that guidance, which is an expert on business.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to talk about your community growth, and I do believe that you niching down has also been why you've grown, which again is funny, because I do think that people worry a lot that niching down will stop that from happening. And there's a lot of evidence and a lot of books by experts saying that actually it's the opposite. You've had really great community growth since we started in intensive. We're still working together. And when you're in the intensive, you're a really intelligent woman, and you made the intelligent choice to do the TikTok training at the same time as doing one-to-one coaching with me. And that really accelerated things. You've grown hugely on TikTok. I noticed this morning, even your Instagram's grown quite a lot. And you've mentioned to me that your mailing list has grown from that, which is really important to talk about, because extra followers don't mean jack shit unless they're actually going somewhere else. Your mailing list has grown, your wait list has grown. How has that community growth and what we did to help you spur that on affected your self-worth and your confidence?
It's affected it massively. Honestly, having my content resonate with so many people is quite validating. And it just confirms that stepping through that fear, niching down, gaining clarity in who I am, my messaging, my offerings, all of that delivers results. And what I found really beneficial was specifically the TikTok training, and not just getting to know best practices and navigating a new platform that was completely foreign to me, but also it supported me in moving through that fear, in showing up more online and being more professional. What elements did I need to make it more professional for my audience and safe for my audience? But also, what elements did I need to be comfortable in showing up online? And also how to use TikTok as a business tool and not feeling pressured to lip sync, because I think I did anyway, or, a lot of people of our generation have this assumption that TikTok is for younger people. So the TikTok training actually really supported me in working through that, having a community where I am connected with people all around the world and who are giving me feedback on how my content is actually resonating with them, how it's helpful, how it's making a difference in their lives, is just a reminder of how important this work is for me. And I'm just so grateful for our work together so that I could develop myself to better serve my community. But having the growth and actually having people come through and join the mailing list and express interest in actually working with me, again, is just a reminder of the work that we've been able to put in and how that is being received by everyone.
It's a funny thing. I definitely wouldn't suggest anyone bases any kind of worth on following. And if people think that a small following means you can't make money, that's incorrect as well. But it does make you feel more valid if people are really resonating with it, and if a lot of people are resonating with it, and it just has this really juicy flow-on effect to how you'll show up in all of the rest of your business. And well, firstly, we clearly established that TikTok was where that community and that particular audience, your target market, is.
Yeah.
If anyone's avoiding being on a platform or even a physical space where their ideal target market is hanging out, well, that's not really running a business. I hope that you realize that TikTok, there is an argument, and it has been spoken about in very professional spaces, including Congress, that TikTok may have single-handedly stopped the US from going into recession in the last 2 years, specifically through the fact that it has entirely revived the American publishing and worldwide publishing industry.
Wow.
So if you're going, I'm not going to go in there because blah, blah, the power of that space is crazy.
Yeah, actually, so that's really interesting. I have 2 more points to add. So all of my one-to-one clients have come through TikTok. So, I have been on Instagram for a while now, at least a year longer than I've been on TikTok. And my community on TikTok is like 10 times more compared to Instagram. And the second thing that I wanted to say was actually doing the TikTok training within the coaching container allowed me to do that foundational work of setting up my lead generation and all of my funnels, so that when my community grew on TikTok, I had somewhere for them to go. So that whole process of doing them side by side was really beneficial for me. But yeah, definitely can see more return on investment on TikTok as a platform.
Absolutely. I'll keep shouting it from the rooftops. But we'll just have a couple more questions before we finish up.
Yeah.
And lucky last one about working with me. I'd love to hear any highlights from working with me, and if you have any words for people who are like thinking about it but aren't sure about, specifically about the investment. I think a lot of people are held back by the investment.
Yeah.
Did you get the worth out of it?
Yeah, honestly, it has exceeded my expectations. I feel like a completely different person now compared to before we started working together. Honestly, with your support, I feel like I have expanded into a version of myself that is embodied, intentional, and empowered business owner. And so it's just not about like the knowledge and the strategy and planning that you helped me with, but also in strengthening the soft skills needed to be able to hold myself in such a space. So being mindful of my energy, mindset shifts, dealing with the keyboard warriors, navigating imposter syndrome, and even celebrating the small wins too. I realized that business coaching is a container for business development, but self-development too. And one of the things that really drew me into working with you initially, Honey, was your approach. I love that you constantly come back to self-alignment and you look at things holistically. So business, but business in the context of your life. Also really appreciate the fact that you're very no bullshit and very blunt in a loving way. You have called me out on a couple of things, but I've really appreciated that. And I love having someone to be accountable to. I love having someone who can be a vision holder and who can hold you to a high standard and who can mirror back to me strengths, but also where I need to work on. And I think if you are making that investment in business coaching, it makes sense to be open to having this sort of feedback, because there is no other, sorry.
It's in the contract.
Yeah, exactly. But there is no other way to be if you do want to actually see change and results. So yeah, our 10-week container, I felt like I knew it was going to be intense, but looking back on it, it's actually pretty crazy to acknowledge just how much we got done. We completely reworked everything from the ground up. We made the business plan that I'm actioning, and that really gave the textbook Capricorn in me peace of mind, knowing that I have direction and things that I'm working on and that everything is intentional. Like, unlike before, I was just throwing spaghetti at the wall. I say that I think it's crazy to see how much we got done, because at the same time, it was gentle. Yeah, it was gentle. It wasn't like you were piling on tasks and telling me to get my shit together, but it has been a really collaborative and a really synergistic experience. So thank you. And it is definitely worth the money, the investment. So to anyone who is considering business coaching, yeah, what are you waiting for? It is honestly the best money that you will invest in your business and in yourself.
Thank you. And I think that trust element is so important. And I always, in the first session I have with people, I go, you've got to trust me. And sometimes you might be like, what the hell is she on about? But if you trust me, the little calling out that it's coming from a really good, beneficial place, always. I would never suggest something to someone if it's not a long-term beneficial suggestion. But people have to commit to that trust for it to work like it has with you.
Yeah, totally. Again, if you are investing your money, you need that trust, because as I get older, I realize how important it is to have supportive allies and mentors in my team, people who have actually walked the road that I want to take. It's so important to surround yourself with mentors who will give you that advice, because it will save you time, energy, money spent following the wrong thing. Yeah,
literally years. So to finish up, I'd love you to chat about any starting point offers that you have for people, and also where people can find you.
Sure. So I do have some free resources. I have a trigger toolkit available on my website. It's a pretty easy and comprehensive guide to navigating your triggers. I also have guided meditations on Insight Timer, guided somatic practices, and a lot of psychoeducation about trauma, about the nervous system, all on my social media platforms. And I'm currently working on a range of digital tools that will be super affordable so that you can use them on your own self-guided journey. They're actually tools that I use with my one-to-one therapy clients. So hopefully by the time this episode is published, they'll be available to purchase on my website. You can find me at embodiedselftherapy.net, at embodiedself.therapy on Instagram, and at embodied self-therapy everywhere else.
And you're also still taking clients this year for one-to-one sessions. So books are open, and I will link to everything, how to find you, all of those tools, and also where to book in any sessions if someone hears this and they're just ready to go, in the show notes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Bianca.
Thank you, honey.
I hope that you enjoyed that interview with Bianca. I hope that you've found her inspiring, or maybe even that she is going to become your therapist. Definitely give her a follow and check out my show notes for links to what she's doing, her offers, and her freebie. If you are craving that level of transformation and growth in your business, I have only a couple of spaces left for one-to-one coaching intensives in February, and then the next round is in May. The good thing about these long wait times is that you have a really juicy payment plan, and it gives you the time to save up the investment if you need to. But if you're like, all right, I really need to make this change, I really need this help, get in touch and we will get you onto this expansive journey. Have a great week.